Good morning, everyone. I'm Helio. This is Thomas. Yep. So basically, we are some guys working on compliance and using basically tooling for a long time. I came here as basically as dressing my open source hat, as an openchain board member, an ORT contributor, and contributed several open source parts, and basically responsible to doing some pipelines for tooling itself.
I work as a private contractor, basically, independent contractor, doing all kinds of helping companies with OSPO work or ORT work. But again, we have lots of cover. Let's say let's move on.
Yeah. So this talk is mostly to tell how much effort your organization should invest in open source. Usually people say a lot. This is very highly expensive things. If you're thinking in the old world, that part that's involving pushing things to curation, several review times, discussions about several teams of lawyers because it's a connection to everyone. This is just was resource intensive, time intensive, and cost extensive there. And that's so the question is how much effort there. That's different answers for each case, but in this case we try to reduce this using automation parts and how it can be done in software. So this is the actually idea of the original thing. Normally the people that decide for doing this purchases part is the ones that don't understand the entire pipeline and the whole process of this. So the choice for a tool is like someone come to you and tell the tool do that. It looks like they do that. Someone says, nice, it do everything. It buys it, put in there. And then you are everything okay. And absolutely not. Because this probably, and as everyone, we used to say that there's no tool that do everything today. Not at all. If someone comes to you and says that, is existed? No. So, this is
really, if you look at what is kind of the discussions in the open source community, OSPOs, it's basically the other way around. It basically says like, hey, before you buy a tool, first look at your processes and develop a risk-driven, data-driven process, and then start the mixing and matching the tool. So what I commonly see is people rush to, oh yeah, we're just going to buy the market data. They go to Gartner and they see the things and all the stuff. And I can tell you that, well, most of the companies that I work with, they don't look at Gartner reports anymore because the open source solutions are pretty much the leading ones, and they don't pay Gartner. Yeah, it's really, you learn, the people that have really been doing this a long time, they see they have different tools for different jobs. There's not one rule to rule them all. There's just like, hey, for this particular thing, we're using this tool, for that particular thing, we're using that tool, and you kind of have to mix, match, and also not every organization is the same. You always see a slight deviation, basically, with what people are using. So this is one of the things that I've been working on for a long time. Like coming from an OSPO background, is basically say like, hey, not just looking at compliance, but looking at the more bigger picture. To say like, okay, so we want to not only use open source, but also contribute open source back. So if you build a pipeline as an OSPO, you don't only want to use it for compliance, but also think about your contribution use cases or your merchant acquisition use cases. Typically, as an OSPO, you have to do all of that. So yeah, you of course want to be safe. Which actually is not only means secure, but also means safe from basically how you use it in your organization. You want to respect licenses, so not just to the letter of what the law says, but actually most of my customers actually they more worry about what this regulation says or what is written in the contract. And also you want to help basically your upstream sustainability. So you don't want to just use open source and then figure out like, oh crap, the open source community decided that this tool is no longer viable, or there's like a single maintainer, or they changed the technology stack. So when you're basically doing a tool check, please stop doing this thing where you are patching it on your side and not doing any upstream. In reality, most organizations that I work with run for the majority on open source. You need to learn how to work with the open source community and actually be part of that and actually give back in some forms. Now, that can be in monetary, it can be in the developer firepower, but you really need to think about doing it upstream. And especially if you look in the context of compliance, I have had many teams where the compliance department is called the Department of No. So whilst you're doing this, we're trying to figure out how can we make the life easier for developers. Yes, complying with licenses, complying with regulation and with customer contracts is a very, very complex picture. But we believe that we are finally getting to a point in the open source community that we can actually handle this kind of stuff.
So, solving the challenges in the industry, this is mostly things that is the OpenChain group, that is we are mostly part, are doing. We are trying to connect every single open source, let's say, entity around us to actually work together to get a single only way to produce the results. We are not advocating for a single product or a single open source solution, but actually in a completely ecosystem that we can be choose exactly to fit your necessity inside the company. So in this way, we are trying to put everyone together that we can talk to each other, and then the products or even the solutions can talk with each other, and then it makes it easy. The solutions being used in companies there at all, because basically this is a company-based thing that we not. It's just obvious thing. So you can see that we're trying to together all the foundations and in 2 lanes connect everyone. It's a really, really hard job right now, because it's every foundation and every single project has different goals and agendas, and then to make things work together, this is the job of the open chain that we are trying to reunite as ones. Yeah. So this is Thomas.
So you might wonder, okay, so to answer the question, where we're actually getting into the community with this, well, the obvious one is first talk to your legal counsel, because again, it's about your company's, organization's contracts and your obligations, but also, but more importantly, work together with your, in the OSPO and FOSS community to basically learn how to do it. There is not a guide that works, but especially surprisingly is that when we started out, and like Marcel and I, we started being in this for close to 10 years. In the beginning it was all like compliance, we can talk about it. Now there's for a lot of things, basically we can talk about things like, okay, how do you do this, how do you do that? There are recipes available, so it's much more easier instead of basically trying to do just so. Yes, listen to your legal counsel, but also basically work in the community to basically say, like, hey, how are you doing this? Work with your supply chain, work with others to basically learn how they are doing it, and try to balance what you're doing in your industry.
So, talking about OSS Review Toolkit, this is for mostly to us one of the key parts of the can do in the orchestration of the whole tooling part. Yeah. And people has this strange concept that the ORT is the thing that do everything, which is completely not true. Is the thing that controls everything. This is the most important thing. So we live in a world that we need different tools for different setting parts. We started with compliance in the beginning, but then in the end, we end up now dealing with vulnerabilities. We need to connect to multiple type of services to get in whatever necessity data to guarantee the compliance, CRA, other things. There's just before ORT, we didn't have any possible solution that to do in a simple orchestration there. So today ORT is becoming one of the most easy ways to do it, orchestration between multiple tools and multiple services. Yeah. So the capabilities, there's dependency analysis. Basically try to look on every single package manager in the world and try to find the dependencies with there, which basically is very difficult thing, because people decide to create a new package manager every 5 minutes. And then after that, we can go to talking about how to do the compliance scanning, that is doing vulnerability assessment, with connecting to different services there. We're doing reporting for multiple formats, that is exactly like people requests, Cyclone DX, SPDX, VEX, whatever that. So it's always different thing or different necessities for different companies there, and always new tools that was offered or pop up in the open source, and very difficult and costly to connect everything there. So using ORT, we can diminish this cost for this and control and actually doing the process there. Yeah. Okay, go on.
So maybe some unique features. Again, there's many other open source solutions. I think that one of the things that makes ORT unique, it's really driven by actual users. So there are actually original OSPOs that are kind of familiar with the problem. That have we have also lots of connections with lawyers that are using it. Most of it was born in Germany, so you have a lot of German automotive companies using it, and that basically means that it's gone to many different companies, and it's not a single vendor controlling the project. It's neutrally hosted. It's also one of the few tools that actually you can use to actually obtain sources. So a lot of things for your license compliance, you have to do so-called complete corresponding source bundle for your code. This is just a built-in standard feature. Because guess what? It's being developed by OSPOs and legal departments that are like, we just need a tool to do this for us. So the other kind of unique feature is basically correct findings. So one of the things we got really annoyed by where previous tooling was, a license finding is incorrect. Oh, I have to file a support ticket with the vendor to try to fix this. Yeah, tomorrow is my release. I cannot wait for the vendor support team to fix this. I need to have the independence, the data sovereignty to basically just be able to do this myself. And that's really where we're like, no, we can't wait. Also, I don't want to share certain opinions and data. Policy as code will go later on how that kind of works, but it's very powerful here. End-to-end traceability. So this was also kind of maybe built in by accident. Purely when we're developing ORT, we needed certain things where bugs are coming from. So when there's a problem reported by a customer, we can actually trace back where that thing actually comes from. We can completely go to the entire pipeline and figure out where it comes from. And the last bit, which is especially where ORT kind of shines, is in the high compliance industry. When you deliver a car, the law says you have to support it within 15 to 25 years, which basically means we're using the tooling right now, but my successor or successor still needs to be able to use that, be able to reproduce exactly the same, figure these things out, because guess what? That's what the law requires. And then people are like, oh, we have an SBOM. Yeah, that's indeed very useful, but the SBOM cannot capture the complete everything that you're doing. So this is where we're basically really architected for. Like, no, you can run it. It's Kotlin-based, JVM-based. You're probably going to run it in 10 years, 20 years. It probably will still work, and you have complete access to the source code.
Okay, let's talk on the whole entire process there. And the way that the ORT architecture works today, we have several steps that can be done. So you can see that in this example that there's multiple tools that assign it there. And even if you look in there, in every stage, every single step is done differently, individually. So this means that you can actually orchestrate this in the way to do every steps, intermediate with several other possibilities in the middle. From here, we are going from the beginning of there, so it's basically source code analyzing to actually download the source code. That's actually very useful for every company that needs to retrieve the source code and keep in the house, thinking about that this is a mandatory thing for CRA or UNC 155. And then you can go to these multiple scanners that up to your choice there and go in there. And then this is one of the most important features for ORT, that is the policy-based rule violation there. And then it comes to report as a notifiers that you can deploy everywhere, even of your internal part of your company there. So you see that it's up to your choice. It's not what the tooling telling to you, but the tooling providing to you. That is completely one thing that is free you of the possibilities.
So the other nice thing, the toolchain basically produces all of the results in a single HTML file. That has a many benefits. Think about it on the basic. We have different users using ORT. So on one side, we have the smallest independent legal counsel or independent open source developer to major companies running on it. The beauty of it is they get all the results in a single HTML file. So if you're in a large company and you need to basically, where I typically see they're separated, you need to send the results to another. You can send the SBOM, which is hard to figure out. Sometimes it's a big relate file. Or you can just send all the results in a single HTML file. So you can just email it. There's no problem. You can just email it. Also, if you think about this longevity, in 10, 20 years, somebody has to be able to look at it. can you guarantee that your web server and all the infrastructure you got from your commercial vendor will still be up and running in 20, 25 years? No. But now you have your results in a single HTML file. Is it perfect? Maybe not, but the majority of the results that you need is in this file. And you can easily browse it. You can, as I said, you can easily zip it up, email it, or post it on your Artifactory. You can keep this real easy, very, very, very long time. So I have tons of customers that just put it in Glacier, for instance, and yeah, done. They have the sboms, they have the reports, they can see what has happened, what is in there, and you can easily browse this.
And then even if you don't want to go before to the web report, we always have the raw results available that can generate this web report. It means that you can even create your own output from the original whole data. So all the data is available forever and not fixed and hidden inside some weird database or something.
So maybe to go make it a little simpler, I actually wrote down the kind of standard conversation that you kind of normally see between a legal counsel and engineer when they have to do a product review. And we were literally like, how can we automate this? Like, how can we take care, how can we make this conversation, how can we eliminate it? And not because we want to separate the legal counsel from the developers, no. Both sides, the base data, you don't want to base information, you just want to automate. If there are special cases that need handling where a legal counsel is, that's the interesting thing for a legal counsel, that really a legal counsel is interested in, that's where you have the conversation for. But basically what we're trying to do is automate the handshake between like developers and legal counsels, or developers and security team, developers and OSPO, really try to automate this. So we basically can feed this kind of formula to our evaluator that looks like, hey, what we're doing in the code, what are we doing in a legal context, what we're doing in a product, and what are we doing in a security side. And you can actually make it as crazy as you want, because you can add more and more whatever you want to. So if we start translating, and now we're going to go a little bit more in deep, and ORT has different files to configure these things. As Helio already showed, we have an ORT YAML file that's kind of where the developer encodes their, like, what they know about the repository. Then we have policy rules that basically you can really write for your legal product and security context. And I'll go in a minute to show how powerful they are. And finally, you can also fix things up. So we have concepts like package curations and package configurations that really allows you to fix up the metadata or fix up scan findings. And these are just either a simple YAML file, or you can actually also program them in via what we call a provider. So you can actually really automate fixes to the data en masse, which really helps basically on getting the data quality up. Then for the product or business context, we support something called labels. You know, like, why you do labels? So we want to think of that conversation with your lawyer. They need to know, like, what are we doing? Where are we shipping this product to? What is this type of product? Is this an SDK? Is this a REST API? So all of this kind of business context, basically, I help organizations develop a kind of label structure for this, and then they can basically encode all of this stuff. These are just things. Normally, we put a little wrapper around it, so they just fill in some questionnaires and fill it in. And the nice thing is, labels are supported in many, many different systems. So for instance, Java supports it, Confluent supports it, but also your Kubernetes stuff supports it. So what you can do is, for instance, if you deploy, say, to a Kubernetes instance, you can take your labels that you have on your Kubernetes instance and pass them onto ORT. So then you can basically, from, say, you're developing in Java and you're deploying on Kubernetes, you have an end-to-end trail where you can see, like, how. So one of the things, for instance, that I recently did for a customer, they want to have a different policy for things that were internal or external. So how do you figure this out? Well, they were deploying on Kubernetes, and guess what? In Kubernetes, when a DNS gets assigned, so public IP gets assigned, the Kubernetes platform knew it. So they just added a label there whenever Kubernetes did it and passed it over to ORT. And basically, so when a team internally says, like, hey, we're internal, well, if they're internal, they shouldn't have a public IP. And so this way, they're basically, the local ORT instance can talk all the way to the Kubernetes cluster, and end-to-end, they can make sure that when somebody says it's internal, and therefore certain policy rules apply, it's really internal. So this is the beauty of what the label system. It's incredibly powerful when set up well, and this really allows you to write policy rules for particular units, for teams, for products. Literally, you can do crazy things with it. Let's go look at the policy rules. So what you can do. So you can write policy rules on pretty much all the data that ORT captures. And so this can be package metadata, it can be the licenses, it can be is a file present or not. Yes, I mean, you already showed the labels, you can do security vulnerabilities. It's really, really powerful. You can also hook it up to other systems because the rules is basically written as a Kotlin script. So you basically have full access to not only the ORT data, but you can also write basically network extensions where you can call a REST API to get other data from your internal systems. And so that really sets it apart from a lot of other solutions where either you have to do things via the UI, or if they say they have policies code, it's kind of a YAML file. So don't get me wrong, the YAML file option rules is also a good way, but really if you're thinking about, hey, I want to take my organization's policy and I want to automate it, you want to have that full flexibility. So yes, it does require some programming, but once you set it up, actually you're not limited by what the tool can do, it's limited what you can implement basically. We did have, in the rules, we have several kind of helper things on how we set it up. So it's not like, we try to make it easy. The idea is basically that you can write your policy rules and that are easy enough that a legal counsel and a developer can also understand them. So we're trying to hide some of the for loops, the while loops, and how you run the tree. We're trying to basically hide that away so that you basically can really easily understand rules. So you can write multiple types of rules, as you can see here. I will not go over all of them, but I just wanted to highlight one to kind of show how this kind of works. So here you see a so-called package rule. So this runs on every package. We have it. You give it a name. So this is copyleft in sources. I do not want to trigger it on excluded. So when you mean excluded, this is a mechanism in ORT when you can indicate, the developer can indicate, hey, does this file end up in my build or release artifact, yes or no? It's like, why do you want to do this? Well, as part of your effort, you might make a risk decision, say like, look, anything that my devs are using for development or for documentation or for testing, we are going to put a more lax regime on license compliance. Because guess what? This is not being shipped to our customers. So that's why you have this minus excluded. You see here also the label functions, and you see the license rule. Interesting, it's called the license view. So you can decide where you run your rules on. So you can basically say like, hey, I want to mimic some of the commercial tools that only run on like the declared or the licenses in package metadata. Or I say like, look, I want to do the scanner findings. Really, you can do whatever you want. And there's some standard built-in functions in our example rules where you can just say like, hey, plus copyleft. So you see the license rule is relatively easy to understand for most developers. And it's no longer like a black box, oh, I need to talk to a lawyer. You can just actually look at the rules and you can kind of understand it. And finally, we have this mechanism on the end, which you can basically throw an error. You can actually throw an error, a warning, or a hint. So you can decide like, hey, is this, we always say errors are must fix, warnings are should fix, and hints are basically nice to fix. So you basically can really decide what you want to do. And you have the option to put a markdown text in there to basically fix the things. Just for give you an idea of what all is possible, I listed most of the helper functions, as we call them, for the various rules. So again, there's lots of things like kind of like really giving you kind of a tool set to kind of build your own rules. Also, we have something called the ORT config repository, where we share some of the rules and all the configuration files. So you don't have to start from scratch. You can actually pick this up and basically use it as your basis. Of course, do talk to your own legal counsel, because again, this is kind of like, it gives you an idea of how rules could work. You need to talk to your own legal counsel and your own business owners to decide like how those rules should work in your organization. This is more basically to get you going and as a kind of a reference. And this is kind of how you get this. So you see this copyleft. This is actually the copyleft and dependency rule. That comes standard from the rules. In the beginning, it will be really scary because you will get tons and tons of violations. Because guess what? Open source is not perfect. The scanners are also not perfect that we use. But again, you're using stuff for free. Now, the good thing is most of the time, if you follow kind of in our how to fix me text, we have kind of a recipe on how you need to do clearance. Most of them are relatively easily fixed, especially if you basically decide that basically, hey, we're going to do excludes. So most of the open source dependencies, again, because the licenses and copyrights are in the sources, so we either scan the source artifact or the source code repository. But of course, in most open source projects, there will be more stuff in the code repository, aka test code, development code, that is actually not in the build artifact or release artifact that you are using. So then we have to, you can mark it up, and you basically can subtract that and say like, hey, what we are actually using from this open source project is this. It's also powerful enough that, for instance, if you're using, say, the Amazon Java SDK, where you maybe have a mono repository with like 500 packages in one code repository, you can also say like, no, we're only using this directory. That's the package that we are using. It's all capable of handling that. So yeah, this is kind of how that looks like. This is completely custom. You can do whatever you want. So the nice thing is when you write your policy rules, you can link to your own wiki if you want to. This is just markdown text that you just defined in the policy rules. So this basically gets rid of what I see a lot, where people run a scanner and they have a separate wiki, and then people have to switch, look the wiki things. No, all of it is in one report. And it's context aware.
And this is interesting because with the moment that this is created and then doing the flexibility of the rules, we are able for one of the usage that is done internally for my team there, is that we are able to pick exactly this message and send it to the other two that was visible to management and visible to developers at the same time. And exactly the same message that represented here is going there, and then the same markdown. So we don't need to show to the managers that want to see a specific ticket to understand that the issue is open and see what is happening, but they don't need to go to a specific server download report to try to understand the report that usually is not easy to them to understand. So this is basically pure data distribution that can show to you easy way to push in there.
And the nice thing is, so for one of my other customers that I'm working for, actually, they're doing a migration. So they're moving source code repositories at the moment. They decided to do a migration to Forjo. The nice thing is they can just write a policy rule, and whenever they do the packages and they see it's in company-owned packages, and they see it's hosted on the previous system, they can just write a rule, and it says like, hey, we see that you're hosting on the previous system. Please, this system is going to be shut down in X amount of days. So the nice thing is you can even write time reports in it. So you can literally say, so instead of doing this blast announcement for like, hey, everybody, this system is going to be shut down, you have to move there, you can literally put it inside your policy rules where you can just flag and basically, okay, this unit, we're going to shut it down at this moment, that unit, we're going to shut it down at this moment. So instead of doing this blast announcement where everybody gets too many emails, just stick it in the regular thing, in the ORT script, and they will know. So again, you can do license scans, security scans, engineering standard checks. You literally can do whatever you want in it in ORT. That's the nice thing about it. So, how much effort? As I said, use ORT policies codes to automate things that are context aware. So then you can really shape down the effort. So one thing that you have to get used to when people use ORT, they people like, oh, we're down to policy rules and we're done. No, you actually will be continuously tweaking policy rules. Not that you change the big lines, but you're figuring out like, okay, in this unit, they're doing this and this and this case. Maybe we are choosing this balance between risk and effort, and you can really, really decide. So you don't have a one size fits all. You can do everything context aware. So you can really decide, hey, in this unit, they're doing mostly things and that's internal, that we consider this low risk, okay, we're doing that. In that other unit where they might deliver to automotive, where if we F up, we have to pay millions in penalties, we're going to have that policy. And you can do whatever you want with using ORT policy as code. So how can you basically scale this up? Because again, you want to use this in a large organization. So the nice thing is ORT comes with standard integrations for most of the CI/CD systems. Most organizations that I know actually customize these. Again, for us, it's kind of like we give you the reference, yes, they work, but most organizations actually look at them and basically build their own versions out of them, because guess what? Every organization is slightly different. So they want to build their own pipelines, their own ways of working. Again, because ORT has a plugin architecture, you can actually make your own extensions on top of it. So this is why, yes, I know some companies that run as vanilla on ORT CI integration, but there are also several ones that build entire stacks on top and basically do their own thing completely on top. So one of the things that I just wanted to give for reference, Again, you see a lot of things where people are like, oh, we have to do everything. This is a slide that we did for here, where we did everything in CI/CD. You don't have to. You can also decide, look, in CI/CD, I'm going to be a little bit more relaxed, but I'm going to run ORT, for instance. When we import, we mirror open source in Artifactory. So when basically we pull in open source from the public package repositories, we run ORT there as well. So on import of open source into your organization, we run checks there, and we have an audit process there that basically checks it. So before it even gets used by our developers, we can already check it. And so you can really decide when do you want to run your check, how, what, why. You don't have to do everything shift left. Personally, shift left is nice, but I really believe that there are certain checks that you should do in shift left with the developers, and there's other checks that you should probably do centrally because they just require more in-depth knowledge. For instance, pattern checks are, in my view, better done centrally than in the CI/CD because most of them. Also, snippet scanning. I'm still not convinced of doing it in CI/CD because there's lots and lots of false positives that can come out of it. It's sometimes more easier to do this centrally with a centrally supported team. But again, in ORT, you decide. How do you want to set up the process? How do you want to build it? It's basically how you want to work. We don't force you.
Yeah. So basically, you can see that the process is pretty much simple there in the way that if you look at this, it can be simply distributed. Like undersized, this fully automated, it may be passed to the necessity of the legal security, and then you transmit everything that goes to the people that do the curation and parts. And this is completely different processes there. It can be treated even in a way that you can simply deploy the result of the site for one team that is really doing one part, that's deploy a cycling in Artifactory, and then from there trigger a second process. This is completely disconnected from the previous team and it's connected for the CI, but at the same time, everyone is doing their job using the same set of data, using the same tooling behind, but not necessarily in the same team, same area, same department, and even dependency of learning different parts of this. So this mostly proves that how we actually can do it this in a separate way there.
So the other nice thing is, because ORT is open source, and you can publish your policy, for instance, to your suppliers. And you can collaborate with your suppliers. So you can say, instead of giving them a paper document, you can say like, hey, here's my ORT policies code. There you have the tool that you can download from GitHub. You can run it, and you can collaborate on fixing up the open source together. Because in the end, how ORT is set up is basically what we usually do for the ORT config repository. It's just a Git repository. You can just give people access to it, and they can just work together on it. So this allows you to not only work basically via inner sort within your organization, where the developers on various teams can basically make corrections to the open source, but you can also do this with your suppliers together. And you can really clean up your whole supply chain, because normally you cannot say, basically go to your suppliers and say like, hey, we are all going to use and insert commercial tool X. You really will get into trouble with EU law, and if you do that, it's not possible. But in this way, if you basically say like, yeah, we have an open source tool, we recommend you using it, and if you're using it, you don't have to read our paper policy, you actually get our policy as code. Here are some CI/CD integrations. So what we see generally is for suppliers, this makes it a lot easier, because they get the policy as code, they get a tool that they don't have to pay for. The only thing that you have to invest is basically clearing up the results. But that you can also negotiate with your suppliers to work this. And finally, you can also work with the open source community, because again, you're working on the standard open source tools. So you can also take, for instance, data that comes from a project called Clearly Defined, or from Ocelot, where we're working in. So you can take other data that come from different sources and help that to basically help with your license compliance. So in the end, what we're looking at is basically look, instead of you having to do all your work yourself, it's kind of stupid. I remember we were in Toulouse in an open-chain meeting, and we were all asking, I think it was the Linux kernel, who's currently doing the license compliance for the Linux kernel? And like, I think there were like 35 people, and like 27 of them were raising their hands. We are not competing in this thing. Why are we doing this? We have tons of, if I look at the technology stack of tons of companies, it's pretty much exactly the same. You are not competing on what open source you're using. Why can we not work together as a community to basically say, like, let's clear this up? From a licensing perspective, but maybe also from a security perspective, let's just work together on actually fixing this up. And basically, ORT is one of the tools that tries to make this more easier by providing a standard kind of framework, and basically by trying to give you something that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can basically say, like, look, you can look on our website, sorry, on our GitHub repository. There's a list of adopters. We have some major companies that basically are using it. So it's not like a small little project anymore. People are using this in production every day. There are thousands of scans being made with this tool. Is it perfect? No. But instead of you trying to reinvent the wheel, it might be easier to just basically ask. The tool might not be exactly what you need, and there's other tools, but then we'll literally point you like, hey, maybe try this other open source tools. We know most of the other tool creators in the space. We can happily point you like, hey, maybe this is not for you. Maybe you want to have something else. Again, there's not one silver bullet for everybody.
Yep. So again, going back to the beginning and everything, that how much effort there's. It's basically the decision of how much effort is yours there. You can actually always go to the easy solution and buy something that tells to you that doing anything, and then end up in the but question there. Oh, I have my things, but now what I do with that, and then it's you have a problem and the effort there's. Or you can decide to actually work with the community in general and ask it, what we are using, what we have available, and how actually we can use it. Maybe this will be less effort than you can think about there. So just contact exactly the ones that completely the groups that correct for this. If you needed to talk, go to to-do group, go to openchain, depending on your necessity. We can guide you to the direction that you needed. And then you can decide by yourself that this is much effort that I want to do it and I afford to do it. That's the goal.
Yeah. As what we generally see is people are used to buying a tool and calling it done. But in reality, with all the regulatory framework changing, buying the most expensive tool in the market is basically not, and you're calling it done. No, it doesn't work anymore. The regulators are asking more and more from you, and the good thing is, well, like since the open source side, it's not like, look, we have not everything supported, but I don't have to go to a commercial vendor where they say like, oh yeah, you'll get it next release, and the next release happens. It's like, oh yeah, it's going to go in the next release. And like, no, if we need the feature now, if I want, I can implement myself. If I don't have the development skills, we have commercial support providers in our ecosystem that can implement it for you. We also have commercial curation providers for you. So basically, it changes from a, I don't have this feature and I'm waiting, to like, no, stop complaining, start doing. It's on you to actually get this done. You are releasing a product in the market. You have to do compliance. But the good thing is, you don't have to do compliance alone anymore. You can do it together in your company, you can do it with suppliers, you can do it with your customers, and you can do it with the community. So if you want to balance how much effort is, again, talk to the community, talk to your suppliers, talk to your customers. You'll be surprised actually say like, actually, yeah, well, I know the legal text says this, but in reality, we are fine with this and this and this. That's it. Any questions? Yeah. We have to get a microphone, I think, or for the audience online, so they can.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the presentation. Quite interesting, and I just want to call my colleague that is doing all the stuff in our company. But I wonder, you said doing crazy stuff, doing what you want, feels like a lot of effort to configure and bring that system into production. Do you have any concrete examples how much effort and how long it would take to set things up for a, I don't know, mid-size project, whatever?
So I have done, so the good thing is if you basically just run on the standard rules, so if your lawyer basically looks the rules that basically we have as out of the box, I've had open source projects operational within 4 days. But look, if you're like a small startup and all the other stuff, it takes a little bit longer because you have multiple teams. The main thing that I actually look at is not necessarily so much the open source clearance stuff. What we mainly figured out is that a lot of problems are actually in how developers set up their own projects. Because you kind of need to, for instance, your source code bundles to work, your developers need to, for instance, put ideally the source code location in the packages that they publish. So ORT can basically, so the way how ORT works, it just follows your package manager's regular dependency graph and metadata to find out what the sources are. So what we typically see, one of my customers that I now have has an issue with is like, they publish their internal packages with the same name as an open source package. I'm like, no, that's not smart. When you build your own own packages, put it in your own namespace. Because guess what? You're looking at things at scale and you're automating things. The tooling for it to operate, if you want to write rules on your software versus what is open source software, well, the tooling needs to be able to differentiate. And one of the things we do there is you can, for instance, look at the namespace or you can look at the code repository. So yes, there are some things. So most of the time, actually, the most effort, in my view, yes, we have to clear the open source. That's relatively straightforward. Is actually getting the developers to work in a particular manner.
And that's an unintended behavior of ORT. It was never intended to actually do that, but from time to time, I work now with in a project, a huge company that's doing more than 1,000 different projects. We get all the possible animals that you can imagine there. And at some point, one thing that ORT was never intended to be, but it's kind of working, is like a quality management tool. It's because we're starting to see problems on the origins of the build systems of the developers that was triggering, like, looks like a defect when we are doing the analysis there. Then we tracing back and discover that actually the project was not using correctly their even own build system. So the effort is really directly related to how good the quality of the code is there. So you can use the tool even to see that how the output coming from out there too. So if you imagine even a small, easy, let's say you choose one single package manager in JavaScript world, you can have at least 10 ways differently to get the dependency with one single package manager. So if you have consistency things, the effort is really slow, and then you can go very easy. Maybe in one day you can have some results. But if you had this background that coming legacy, then it will take a little bit more effort on that.
Yeah, so that's really, we're not doing special. All we're trying to do is kind of get your engineering like follow basically what is our open source best practice. So we don't have our own like set of things that we sell. We say, like, look, this is how your build tool says you should be doing things from a security, from a licensing perspective. All we're doing is do that. And that's basically like, literally, that's all that ORT tries to kind of enforce. Basically, like, hey, these are best practices that you find over. And so that's where, yeah, it's kind of tricky. That's usually the hurdle where people struggle on. But it's like, it just makes sure that your company is specific. And in the context of the CRA, that's actually very useful that your development teams are actually following what is kind of the standard. So most of the time when I scan open source projects just on GitHub, it usually works out of the box because they follow these practices. But when I go into commercial organizations and they do closed source, they don't follow these kind of standards. Common things, there's like, it might sound stupid, they don't properly do Git tagging of releases. So how are you supposed to find a release if they don't actually make a tag for a release properly?
Okay, we have time for one more question.
No more question.
More questions. You will be around for a while, I hope.
We are around till closing.
Thank you very much for a good talk. You caused me a lot of problems because now I have to look into ORT much deeper. Thank you.
Yeah. Good.
Applause.